I mean, yesterday I already gave like most of my thoughts about the patch, right? This is a very small patch. Most of the changes are oriented towards solo queue, not pro play. It's very lame that the world's patch is this small. So Riot says, average play jungle champions, Briar, Volibear, Warwick are receiving nerfs to some of their stat shaky potential. Volibear with his cosmic build. In particular, Warwick players typically resonate more with being unkillable, being fast and hunting and damaging, so we're taking power out of his damage instead of any of those attributes. Malphite, to add a bit of more detail here about the Master Curve Orianna changes. We're buffing Malphite because a Malphite at 51% is weak, it's not because he's easy. This is because new Malphite players perform very well on him compared to other champions, while his best players don't perform that much better than his newer players. Okay. So Malphite when mastered sits at 53 to 4 win rate, but other top lane champions when mastered are sitting at 54 to 55. Malphite newer players are performing around 49, whereas other new players on top lane champions sit around 46, 47. Okay, these are really nice number explanations, but I still don't understand why this would be a good reason to buff Malphite. Like, isn't it a good thing in the game that other champions, when they're mastered, are at higher win rate? And that Malphite is at higher win rate when he's not mastered? Like, isn't this literally just good for the game? Why would we buff Malphite because of these reasonings? Because from how I envision, Malphite should not be really, like, you know, be same strength as other champions when mastered. His gameplay is just horrible. His whole gameplay is just either pressing R or pressing Q off cooldown. I mean, he's just a like completely outdated champion that badly needs a rework. And I understand it's not easy, right? When an outdated champion is in the game like that. But I don't really see this as a good reasoning to like buff Malphite, really. This just means that looking at a Malphite that's 52 is still a bit weak, whereas a different top lane champion like Gambling at 52 would be overpowered. Fizz is another of these champions who's stat weak by mastery. In high levels of play, he has to play very reactively, waiting for level 3 spike and trying to get a 1 for 0 ability trait with E at level 1, dodging a spell and landing E. We're making some changes that make up more effective when actually getting to play in these early levels with W. Q auto W or E auto W. If he's able to weave this auto sim with extra on hit damage, he will be a bit more lethal. Also, if you haven't tried the Blackfire build that's been making its rounds recently, probably worth checking it out. He really benefits from haste and damage ramp. Wait, what? Blackfire? Are the people actually building Blackfire on Fizz? Because I remember I did a Fizz game a while ago and I bought Blackfire Torch and everybody was flaming me. Everybody in the YouTube comment section was flaming me that Blackfire Torch is a completely troll item on Fizz, even though the stats make perfect sense for him. But looking at low analytics, I don't really see. I mean, let's go, for example, Gold Plus, I guess, more data. But people, I don't think are building Blackfire Torch. I mean, there's 3k games here, but most people go Leechbane. And then second item, I don't really see any Blackfire Torch or third item. So I'm not sure what Riot means by Blackfire Torch. It means first item, do they mean second item? Maybe they mean first item. Okay. Well, Nemesis was right once again. Orianna, overall raw and similarly durable builds are in an okay spot overall. We're trying to strike the right balance for champions that have flexible options, in particular that are assassin matchups, especially for regular play, feel a bit even for both sides. In solo queue, a lot of these immobile major champions don't feel they have a ton of agency, can feel bad, so we think this is important for their play experience. Whether you want to build Ludens, Raw, Seraphs, or Blackfire Torch, and for each different skill bracket, they should all be good. Right now, though, for Orianna, she doesn't pay enough for her damage trade-off when going for these durable builds. These changes are aimed at having that spike where you don't have much AP and relying on base damages in raw builds feel like a larger trade-off. Okay, I really don't agree with what Riot is saying here. I mean, at least like from my experience. I think raw Orianna is garbage. This shit deals no damage. I think this champion is completely cosmetic with raw. It feels 50 times harder for me to play into Seraph's Orianna. But ultimately, the bigger problem that I have with Orianna is just that I think her base damages are too high because she just can't lose lane. I think if her base damages were a bit lower and she had more AP skill, she would just be in a healthier spot, is what I think. Veigar. Last year we nerfed Veigar W, which was a bit painful for some of his wave clear breakpoints. We're giving him back to this 10% rapey ratio, especially on his rank 1 W, to make these moments a little bit more palatable. There was a lot of in-depth discussion on various Veigar builds, and we're not ruling out deeper work in the future, but for this patch we're going with something tried and tested. Okay, interesting. Camille is one of the scaling 1v9 AD fighters that we think is pretty close to being viable in certain situations. we're giving a bit of buff to some of her fallback and harass patterns in some of these matchups to let her get through lane a little bit more reliably. She's already pretty good at dueling in the mid game, so the armor growth doesn't matter a ton at those points in the game, and we're indexing her power more in the areas where she needs it. Graves. I misspoke a bit yesterday about Graves changes. I meant to say that most Graves go for these type of squishy no durability one-shot builds, only shield bound 4. We're making some changes here to make the pure AD build a bit weaker, and by extension make the cleaver build, which is a little bit tankier, stronger. We're not trying to kill the pure AD build, but making multiple ways of playing Graves more viable. Okay, Rod corrected it on the thing they said yesterday, which I also called them out for. So there's a couple of things here to say. So first of all, Anivia will get 1 second less on Q, and E damage will go up by 5. Obviously, this is 10 if the E is empowered. Are these good Anivia buffs? Definitely yes. Anivia really benefits from lower Q cooldown as well by a lot more than like an average champion, because she builds usually a Roa first item or Catalyst. She doesn't get a lot of haste in her build. It's like one of the weaknesses of Anivia. So I think this is like a really nice way to buff the champion. And then the E damage is also fine. I mean, Anivia does really rely on this E damage being like in a good spot for her to deal damage. She already kind of struggles with damage because a lot of her power is utility in the kit. And I think this is probably like one of the best ways they could have buffed Anivia. Katarina is getting 4 armor. I think this is a really scary buff. Sorry. Yeah, I think 4 armor is really big buff, in my opinion, for a champ like Katarina. I already think she's really strong, and again, I just don't understand why the champion would need a buff. But in any case, 4 armor is impactful whether she plays against mages or not, because a lot of the... First of all, she's a melee champion. A lot of the damage you take is from either autos or you take it from minion aggro, and then also this helps her in like a little bit of tougher matchups, right? Because in my opinion, Katarina's easy matchups are mages. The tough matchups are like bruisers or something like that. So matchups like, I don't know, Zad, Yasuo, and whatever, if you play against like a really good player, I mean, this is like, especially this buff will help you even more in these like tough matchups. This is gonna be like, what, at least 0.5% win rate, maybe more. I mean, yeah, I mean, decent buff. So Malphite is getting +3 armor and 10 base damage on E. I think this is such, like, again, I know it's like very hard to buff Malphite, right? In the past, Riot went hard at Malphite W. That was the spell they buffed a lot in the past because it was like the only spell that was like fair to buff. You can't really buff R, you can't really buff Q, because then you just go Comet Q playstyle Malphite. E or W are probably like the only things you can buff. The passive is already pretty big number. So 3 armor. It's not like insanely a lot for a champ like Malphite, because first of all, his base armor is already high, and then he gets amplified armor from W, and he builds armor, so the more armor you have, the less like effective this buff is. And then more E-base damage. This is like a nice buff because it's like shading and wave clear power, right? And usually Malphite doesn't really want to buy Bombis as well, because Bombis is a dog shit item. So the wave clear buff is nice. That's like the real buff of the patch here. Ultimately, I do wonder if Malphite should get... I mean, I saw this suggestion from Ranger, and this is an interesting suggestion. Should Malphite get a power reshape similar to Rammus? Because recently Rammus got a mini rework where they basically made him be less good only against physical damage champions and be more okay overall. And that way Rammus can get more power into the kit. Right, and maybe Malphite should be the same. Maybe Riot should make it so Malphite isn't only just against AD, make him a little bit better against everything. But yeah, maybe that's just one way to approach this champion. But obviously this champion needs a rework. Pantheon. New monster mod goes to 0.8. What was it? Pantheon wiki lol. So wait, what was it before they nerfed it the second time is the question. So they nerfed it from 90%. They nerfed it from 90%. So, I still feel like the clear split is quite weak. I mean, this is not an insanely strong buff, right? And then the minion W damage goes up to... I don't know. I still feel like it's going to be on the weak side. Like, yes, the champion will be able to full clear probably before 330, but it's still a little bit of a weak clear. So, I don't know. Maybe he comes back in pro play. So Veigar W will get a revert. This nerf happened long time ago. It's coming back now. W will get flat out 10% more AP ratio increase in early game, and late game it will scale to 110%. So Veigar's late game will be a lot more stronger. This is obviously a late game skewed buff. But the reason why I like this buff and why this buff is actually very impactful is because this buff in high elo allows you to start putting points into E faster. So In the past, or when currently on Veigar, you have to do 3 points W and then you can start putting 2 points into E and then maybe 4 points into W again. This will make it so Veigar will go again 2 points W most likely and then a point into E and then maybe a point into E or W and then vice versa again, point into E or W. So you will be able to split max Veigar differently with more points going into E, which will be a buff to the champion. But not only this also affects his wave clear breakpoint, like Riot mentioned, so his farming is going to be a little bit nicer. So this is a buff to Veigar. I think, yeah, Veigar's two best builds are probably just like Proto Belt with Tear or Roa with into Criblum. I think those are probably the best builds on Veigar right now. So, champion nerfs Briar. So, Freak said that apparently the passive is a very low elo skewed lever, where low elo players just passive stack, I think, to the maximum a lot more. So that's why they're opting to nerf into passive for Briar. Okay, she's losing a lot of late game damage. This is a late game skewed nerf, I think. Orianna is getting slammed. She's losing 40 base damage on W. And the only way this is a buff is if you reach 400 AP, which it basically is too late in the game. Orianna is getting slammed in lane with this change. And what this is also going to do is it's going to make Orianna be Q max, not W anymore. I don't even think you will do 2 points W. Maybe 2 at most, but 3 will not be worth anymore, for sure. I have to say that this was the mistake in the first place. A spell like Orianna W should have never had this high base damage. 270 is an extremely high base damage, and it is the reason why Orianna is just considered the champ that doesn't lose lane right now. Because she can't, like her W number is too big. 230 is more of an average spell base damage, right? And then the AP ratio going up. These are nice changes, however, it is a nerf to the Orianna. It is a nerf, and especially in pro play, because this is a lot of her early game being down. This will also nerf, obviously, Roa builds more than Seraph into Horizon or whatever you want to build. So I like that, honestly. I do think the Roa build should always never be as good as Seraph's build, and I also think it's, in general, not as good anyway. Volibear getting nerfed, 5% AP ratio on passive, E damage also down by 10% AP ratio. This is mostly they're trying to nerf the Cosmic Drive version of Volibear. I genuinely think that as much as this might be, let's say, 1% win rate, which I don't even know if it's going to be 1% win rate, it will not be enough. This champion will need further nerfs, I think, down the line, because honestly, even when I play against Volibear and he's supposed to be a low elo skewed champion, I cannot beat this champion even in high elo. Like I played against Volibear yesterday and he completely just disgusting amounts of damage, utility tankiness. I don't know. I just think instead of nerfing his ratios, I think Riot is obviously trying to nerf AP build more, which is understandable. I think it's maybe time to just nerf like overall some base number, you know, which affects both builds. I don't know. Just think the champion is just overall really strong. Warwick AD growth down by 0.25, so very small nerf here in the AD growth. Attack speed growth also down. Okay, a little bit less damage for Warwick. Okay, here we have the interesting stuff. So, Riot thinks that this Azir adjustment is going to make him worse in Pro while arguably making him similar in solo queue. So, WAP ratio will be worse by 10% early, but better at level 9. So for the first 5 levels you're weaker, at level 7 you're equal, at level 9 you're stronger. Okay. W extra damage mod will be gutted. So what this does is that this heavily affects Azir's wave clear, which is a pro skewed lever, because pros players on Azir are very good at like placing W where the W will hit like multiple minions at the same time. This will heavily nerf his wave clear for the first, I would say, roughly 9 levels. I think 9 or 10 levels, usually that's when you buy Nasher, and that's when your wave clear will not really suffer anymore by these changes because you will clear the wave pretty fast anyway. And then this number will scale up back slowly from level 9 to 18. But this is a massive wave clear nerf throughout the game. Like this is just a massive fucking wave clear nerf. W recharge rate will go up by 2 seconds. The reason why this is very interesting to me is because right now in high elo of Azir, your W is pretty long cooldown already, and you usually can, if you perma spam W, you're barely getting 1 W per. When one disappears, you get 1, and then when it disappears, and you get another 1 up. So the cooldown right now, in my opinion, is kind of perfect, almost. Maybe by 1 second too high, but definitely not by 2 seconds too high. So I think this nerf will matter a lot in lane. is what I'm trying to say. And then as a compensation here, they're making his E do more damage by 10 flat and 20% AP scale. Guys, I just think Azir will lose win rate no matter what here, even in solo queue. I think these are nerfs to the champ overall. I mean, I don't mind it. I think it's good that the champion will finally not be at Worlds, being 100% pick and ban. I honestly think just because the W target damage mod is so gutted that this is the only reason why I consider this a nerf. I think if Riot didn't introduce this W target damage and they only did the AP ratio change to the W recharge change, I would actually think the champion is buffed. Because you would just pick Azir in spots where you would be able to get him through lane. Your whole intention would be to secure him 9 levels of laning, and then he would get an Usher and he would be fucking OP again. But I think with this early game being so bad, you're most likely dropping a Jargon and you're most likely dropping a Grub in competitive play automatically when you drop Azir in lane. Because every single champion will turbo stomp Azir in lane. So I think, yeah, I would just assume these are nerfs. Like the E damage, like bro, you're never Eing to the people for damage, like ever. So okay, Camille, armor go down by 0.5, W cooldown down by 2, W flat base damage up by 10. Is this a nerf or a buff? I don't know. Honestly, at first when I saw this, I thought it's a nerf. Because 0.5 armor got on a champ is usually minus 1% win rate. Camille is a melee champ, she will use armor a lot. She doesn't really buy a lot of armor in the kit either. And, you know, she's a top lane champ. She mostly faces bruiser champions, so the armor there is very impactful. But 2 seconds off W also means that your lane is a lot stronger and you get like a lot more W procs in lane, so you're sustaining more in lane. So in lane, she will for sure be stronger. But once you're past lane, you know, and once she goes very high level, she might actually end up being worse. I mean, I think once you're past like, let's say level 11, 13, I don't know what the level is. I think the champion will be worse. But she is a good scaling champion and her problem is mostly getting through early game. So again, I don't know. So this kind of depends whether you draft Camille, I think, in a good spot or in a bad spot, I guess. Because I think in a bad spot, she might even be worse. But in a good spot, she might be better. I don't know. That's how kind of I envision this change. Overall, I don't even know if pro players are going to be like, hey, I want to pick Camille because of 2 seconds less on W. I don't know. Fizz. So Fizz here is a lot of lines. So W passive damage over time will go up early by a lot, but the scale will be worse. I think you need to have... I don't know how much this is. This is like 300 AP? No, 600 AP or what? I can't do the math in my head. Basically, this is most of the time buff to the champion. Mega buff to the champion most of the time. It will no longer do dot on structure, so his tower pushing is going to be slightly worse. W active base damage will also go up by rank. So this is a buff no matter what. And I also think, yeah, W will be max second on Fizz. And W on hit damage will go up by 10, but the scale will go down by 5. So this change right here is a nerf, I think, at 200 AP, if I remember correctly. So the first lever and the second lever are buffs, no matter what, almost. But the third lever is a nerf pretty quickly. So, minimum R base damage will go up early. So at level 6, your spike is going to be stronger. But past level 6, you will be literally weaker because the AP ratio is weaker. And then the maximum damage is also down. So basically what this means is that Fizz is going to have slightly stronger early game for a slightly weaker late game. And it's lane buffs for Fizz. And lane buffs are good for a champ like this because he is essentially a snowball champion. So I think overall, I kind of have a feeling these are buffs to the champion. Maybe not in low elo, but in high elo. I think these are buffs to the champion. It's kind of how I feel when I read these changes. Because I think good Fizz players will play around W and use W a lot better than bad Fizz players. I just feel like these are buffs to the champion, but not large. I don't know how much his win rate is going to swing here. Definitely not more than 1%. Definitely a lot less, I think. I just think these changes are kind of small, but yeah, his early game is going to be scarier. He can get like all-ins more. You get 1 kill in lane as Fizz, and then all of a sudden you're snowballing, as in before you didn't. Graves Q damage up by 5 to 25, down by 15% AD ratio. So it's a buff early game nerf past like 2 items, I guess. Q2 damage is also up early, worse late. So, it is true that this kind of makes the Cleaver build a little bit better, but I don't think it's even close to being Grace's best build, so I don't think the Grace build is going to change much. And I don't know how to feel about this. I mean, honestly, Grace is usually not that good of a late game champ anyway, because he struggles with range, so maybe this is actually better for the champ, that he has more chances of snowballing early. And also, Q doing more damage also means that his jungle clears a lot faster, right? Or like a little bit faster. So, it's a power adjustment, better early, worse late. It's probably good for the champion, honestly. Wukong, Q bonus AD ratio up by 5%, W cooldown down by 2, W damage down by 5, E damage up by 40, and E is the ability to max second. Is this a buff or a nerf to the champion? I don't know. Because the thing is, like, as much as Q and W are losing some damage here, the reality is that once you get your E points in, this E damage is going to be bigger than the damage you're losing with Q or W. So then you're just looking at more E damage for 2 seconds less W cooldown, right? That's what you're looking at, because you're maxing Q into E. So, I don't know if this is even a nerf to the champion. Like, because usually on Wukong, you're doubling once per fight anyway, right? So, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being a buff. It's just weird. It's just weird to me. This whole changes. I don't know.